What is the craziest way you've seen someone cheat on a test? A while back in this business law class I took, we had a final that was online, multiple choice, had to be completed in 90 minutes, and there were 90 questions. We had a minute per question for a business law class and each of them were pretty detailed. A couple classmates asked if I wanted to take it with them and I declined. So anyways, I heard that half of the class ended up taking the final together. They started and ended at different times. They assigned groups of 3 to 10 questions each. For certain questions they decided to choose different answers so they didn't have the same answer as the rest of the group. One person had a running list of the answers that they found. My brother has diabetes and he didn't study for his math test, the class before. He gave himself too much insulin so that his blood sugar would drop in the middle of the test. He asked if he could go to the nurse's office to check his blood sugar. The teacher took his test and told him to finish it tomorrow. Before he left he wrote down all the problems to the test and went home and solved them. He got an A+ on that test. I know someone who had the answers on their smartwatch. This was before they got super big. Saw a stack of Aquafina labels lying around in my friend's dorm room and noticed that the nutrition facts and ingredients space was blank. When I asked about it, he proceeds to show me a template on his computer to type out answers onto the label's blank spaces. He just prints out his cheat sheet, wraps it around a spare water bottle, and keeps it on his desk while taking the test. In a listening language test, the smart guy would cough if the correct answer was A, scratch his F or C, fiddle his pencil for D, and most brilliantly, do nothing if the answer was B. Overheard 2 of my peers learn Morse code to cheat. But it's faster to study the test than learn fine Morse code. As a teacher I had a totally different person try to take an oral English test in place of one of my students. It was obvious because I knew all the students, despite having approximately 200 students that semester and stereotype of white people thinking all Asians look similar. And I definitely knew the students who had enough English to argue politics. The exam was fun, we had a good conversation, and the student got the only F in the class. Once I made the effort to scan in the label of a water bottle, Photoshop a bunch of info onto it in the form of nutrition information and branding, printed it back out, cropped it, and slapped it on the bottle. Worked like a charm, except that, by that point, I'd memorized the info I spent so much time placing on the label. Had a friend try to learn Braille so he could cheat in Spanish. He soon realized it was just easier to study Spanish than learn Braille, plus he had no real way of actually generating Braille cheat sheets. Our high school had a uniform, which was pleated skirts for girls. I knew someone who would put strips of paper in the hidden part of the pleats. It wasn't too obvious to check and no one was going to ask her to unfold her skirt. I also knew someone who had their friend distract the teacher so that he could sneak into the classroom, put the CD for the test bank in the computer, and memorize the answers to the final. He got over a 90% on the 100 question test, which makes me believe he was smart enough to not have needed to cheat. Geography. The teacher was quite old with a very thick glass. One of my friends simply wrote and draw random things on the blackboard, then erased it and made it look like a dirty blackboard. Wrote the test subject on the blackboard, then lightly erased them just enough to be readable from the back row. The whole class cheat on that day. A kid in my grade 11 social studies class made a huge poster-sized cheat sheet and hung it on the building across from our classroom so that he and several other students could see it when they looked out the window. The teacher never suspected anything until the principal happened to walk by outside and noticed it and gave the funniest look at our classroom through the window. Someone got in trouble, but secretly, I think the principal was actually kind of impressed. In my class we have 2 girls that were BFFs, and every test they made sure at least one of them is getting an A. They had long hair and off the backside of their necks they wrote the answers to the test on a paper and put some glue to make it stick to it. They would sit always one behind each other, and when the test begins the only thing that they did is move their hair a bit while the other person see all the notes. I once just straight took out the pre-test for my history test, Pre-test answers were the exact same as the real test answers. Since I didn't turn it in and I just had the two tests right next to each other on my desk. This was in 8th grade and I swear to God that teacher was making us ace his class on purpose. I'm taking a math test in college and I notice a guy sitting next to me is cheating off of my test. For some reason, I decided to help him out, so I just let him keep on looking. Eventually he starts making weird hand motions. I realize he is asking me to turn back a page, in for a penny and for a pound, so I do. We go through 3 whole pages together and eventually he's whispering questions at me. Ridiculous. Then, out of nowhere, he farts louder than I've ever heard anyone fart before. Everyone in a 20-foot radius turns and looks at him. I keep my head down, finish my test, all the while he doesn't look at me or signal to me again. I left and never saw him again. That was the craziest I've seen, not because it was clever, but because it was the ballsiest turned weirdest cheating I've ever seen. In high school geometry I didn't study a proof. I think it was a proof for Pythagorean theorem. I knew the teacher was a lazy pose, so I just openly got out my textbook and copied it. Got an A. Someone at my school placed a cheat sheet underneath his legs. When he needed it he'd open them, and when the teacher was looking he'd close them. The teacher caught him doing this and confronted him during the test. She told him, "I want you to give me what's between your legs." Everyone laughed when she realized what she said. My friend stole the USB drive from our teacher's projector table in chemistry. We were given MacBook Airs as school supplied tech for the entire year, so he just airdropped the whole USB to every student in the class and put the actual drive back on the table mid-lecture. That dude sells drugs now. I mean, he did in high school too, but as far as I know that's all he does. Brilliant mind that just doesn't give a crap. Seen a girl write formulas on her cleavage and look down at it during a test. Professors can't really look, but she showed us later. In my middle school, this one kid dropped his cheat sheet on the ground under his desk. Anytime he wanted to cheat he just put his head down and read from the sheet on the floor. The teacher didn't notice. I cheated on a Spanish test by having a built-in headphone in my beanie, so before the test I put on text-to-speech all the words I needed to know being spelled out like 10 times each. Never got caught. In high school, I had ridiculously relaxed teachers. They pretty much handed me the opportunity to cheat. One let me take the test home to finish it. One let me take the test in the hallway without being monitored. One put the test online so we had to use laptops, again without being monitored. In short, nobody had to resort to crazy tactics when I was in school. We barely even had to try. When I was in 7th grade, my friend and I shared a basic calculator during every math test. We came up with a way to help each other out. She sat in front of me and there was a ledge on the wall next to us. If we had a question about one of the problems we would type in the number of the problem and slightly slide it to the other. If we just set it down and didn't slide it, there was no question. The other person would reply back with 1 meaning the answer was A, 2 meaning B, and so on. If we replied 10 then we didn't know the answer. Never got caught and ended up getting an A in that class.